So we're finally here, the series that everything has been leading up to, and that is the NBA Finals. Two teams have made their way through their respective conferences, and now we're going to match up. And of course, there's a lot of legacy on the line. There's a lot of storylines that need to be built up and explained. But more importantly, a much bigger question in this series will be answered, and that is, how valuable is it to have the best player in the series on your team? But before I get too ahead of myself, shout out to the Dallas Mavericks, shout out to the Boston Celtics, regardless of what I will say in this video, and regardless of what I will say in the upcoming videos, and regardless of what I will say on stream and on the timeline, these are two really great teams with great players, great coaching staff. You have to do a lot of great things to get to where you are right now, and I think that will get lost in translation, especially when I start to critique some of these players and some of the schemes, etc., etc. But nevertheless, I still think that it is very important to highlight the congratulations to both of these organizations for being in this situation in the first place, to go on to win a championship and make history. Now, with that out of the way, what are my predictions for this NBA Final Series? And honestly, this was easily, and I do mean easily, the hardest and most difficult decision I've had to make in terms of predicting an NBA Finals in quite some time. Because everything, and I do mean everything, points to the fact that not only should the Boston Celtics win this series, but they should win it comfortably. And I believe that is an ongoing feeling that the rest of the NBA community is having right now. However, no one outside of like Boston fans or people who are firm believers in Jason Tatum, no one really believes that it's going to be that simple and easy, despite the fact that, again, all of the numbers point in that direction. What do I mean by that? Got my notes here. So the Boston Celtics finished this year with a record of 64-18, the number one ranked offense by a pretty wide margin, nearly 8 above league average, top 3 defense by a historic margin of plus 11, which is just ridiculous. I did a video on this not too long ago talking about the Boston Celtics and how impressive they have been all regular season long, how it has been historic and legendary status, because when you have a net rating that is plus double digits, you are effectively putting yourself in conversations with other all-time great teams. We're talking about the Golden State Warriors with Kevin Durant, the Michael Jordan-led Chicago Bulls, the 08 Boston Celtics, and then going back even further to some of those 70 teams such as the Lakers and the Milwaukee Bucks. And if you look at all of the teams that have a net rating that is in that same stratosphere of those list of teams, not only are basically all of them considered all-time great teams, but almost unanimously all of them went on to go on to win a championship that year. And if they didn't win a championship that year, it's in large part due to an injury or because they went up against another all-time great team during that exact same season. So again, everything kind of points out to the fact that the Boston Celtics should go on to win a championship this year. And a lot of this has to just do with the fact that they made some very timely additions during the offseason that has really panned out. Upgrading Marcus Smart to Jrue Holiday, going out there and getting a bit more flexible in the front court, in particular at the 4-5 position with Porzingis, and moving off of Grant Williams and Rob Williams, being able to play a little bit more versatile and adding a layer to their offense with Porzingis as well is something that has been just a breath of fresh air. And even with Porzingis not available throughout this postseason run, they still looked really great offensively, very versatile on the defensive side of the floor. And sure, many people are going to sit here and claim that the reason why is because the Eastern Conference is extremely weak, which, to be fair, there is some validity behind that. But I also still believe, regardless, they still had a really good chance to walk through the Eastern Conference, in large part because that's how dominant they have been all season long. And that doesn't even take into consideration the core three that was still there from prior years, and Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, and Derek White. In particular, Derek White, his improvement on the offensive side of the floor has really separated this unit from previous iterations of the Boston Celtics over the past handful of seasons that unfortunately have not consistently found themselves in this situation, in particular with a deep postseason run and especially in the NBA Finals. And honestly, I would go as far as to say, because of that improvement as well as these additions, is a huge reason why this team is so successful and why they can beat you in a myriad of different ways. This is not a roster that is solely dependent on one or two players consistently showing up on a game-to-game basis. Jason Tatum can have a bad game. Hell, Jason Tatum cannot even be on the floor and they can still win ball games pretty convincingly. So because of these additions, the improvement of Derek White, as well as a team that is just a bit more cohesive because of the continuity that they built up over the past couple of seasons now, it's a huge reason why you have a result like this. I mean, it's just ridiculous. But also, this is the exact same reason why a lot of people are hesitant to believe that they're going to go on to win a championship, and that is, like I alluded to in the intro, the value of having the best player in this series. Going back to the list of teams that I talked about who had a net rating in the same conversation as this year's Boston Celtics, all of those teams featured not just all-time great players, but like literally some of the greatest players the NBA has ever seen. Michael Jordan, Stephen Curry, Kevin Durant, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, guard, Jerry West, and respectfully, Jason Tatum just isn't in that conversation yet. I'm still open to the idea that the 25-year-old can improve in his game and mature into being an even better player, and I'm pretty sure that will continue to happen. However, Jason Tatum heading into this series is the worst best player we've seen from an all-time great team probably ever. You can certainly argue that Kevin Garnett in 08, as he regressed, was probably in the same realm of stardom and production. However, I would very well argue that KG as a player was still really great and just tapered off his offensive responsibility as he was on a new team. But this year is a bit different because this is a team, though again, they have the chemistry, they have the continuity, they have the depth, they have the production, they have the new additions that effectively has positioned themselves in a situation to where they don't have to depend on Jason Tatum performing at heights of Curry, Jordan, Kareem, etc., etc. However, a lot of people do question if that is going to be a hindrance on what this team can produce, because there's only so many times that you can rely on role players to produce in very crucial situations in a postseason setting. And honestly, I do believe there is a lot of validity behind these concerns as well. Quiet as kept throughout this entire postseason run, in large part because nobody really cared about the Eastern Conference. Tatum hasn't been having a top 5 or MVP caliber postseason run, especially with his shot selection and his three-point shooting percentages. So far, he's averaging 26 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists, which all sounds great in terms of volume metrics so far in this postseason run. But in terms of his accuracy and his efficiency, it is certainly taking a massive hit as he's shooting 44% from the field, 29% from behind the arc, and 84.5% from the charity stripe. The turnovers are certainly down from his prior finals run, but those shooting splits are so concerning, and it does reveal ongoing concerns that many people have had about Jason Tatum and this Celtics team in particular for the past handful of seasons, and that is their IQ, that is their shot selection, that is their ability to maneuver, manipulate, and give counters to what the opposing team is showing them. And that's something that, again, is a major concern if you are a Boston Celtics fan or someone who believes that the Celtics are supposed to win. And I would go as far as to say these are other concerns that many people like myself also had for this Celtics team a couple of years ago when they were in the NBA Finals against the Golden State Warriors. And like it or not, all of this conversation is very crucial to predicting this series. And I think a lot of Boston Celtics fans fail to understand this. The reason why people are very critical or hesitant to give a lot of praise to this Celtics team isn't just solely because they cakewalked their way through a weak Eastern Conference this year. It's because we have witnessed throughout the last 2, 3, 4 seasons leading up to this year that a team that has been just as deep, just as talented as really any other team in the NBA has failed to win a championship yet. And a lot of it has to do with just not executing correctly, not being able to produce in late game situations, and Jason Tatum, as the best player on this team, not being anywhere near close to producing to what the best player on the opposing team is able to produce. And that's regardless if it's Giannis, Jimmy Butler, or Steph Curry. Now, even as I say that, however, I also do need to put into context who they're facing this year in contrast to who they faced in years prior. I'm not going to make it seem as if like going up against Jason Kidd as a head coach is the same as going up against Eric Spoelstra as a coach, nor am I going to sit here and argue that being defended by players such as Jimmy Butler and Andrew Wiggins is the same as being defended by PJ Washington or Derrick Jones Jr. PJ Washington and Derrick Jones Jr. are really good defenders, but they're nowhere near close to the impact that I would expect that a Bam Adebayo, a Jimmy Butler, a Draymond Green, and an Andrew Wiggins or a Giannis will have in a series that could potentially hamper what a Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown will be able to produce in this year's finals, especially as both of these players have seen noticeable improvements in their games over the last 3 to 4 seasons. So to be fair, the personnel certainly plays a role in this, and that's the reason why I'm also not heavily leaning one way or another, because I don't believe that the Mavericks have the exact same personnel to take advantage of some of the shortcomings of the Boston Celtics. And that's probably the biggest reason why I do believe that this series in particular will come down to if Jason Tatum gets woefully outplayed by Luka Doncic, because I do believe in this series, Tatum doesn't really even have to play at heights that would rival Luka, that would rival Curry, that would rival Jordan and Kareem and other all-time great players on these all-time great teams, because I don't really think that the opposing team is as good as a lot of the competitors that these teams had to face. The Mavericks are a really great story and have a lot of things going in their favor, but this is a team that in theory, even with Luka, even with Kyrie playing really well potentially in the series, they still should be able to keep up with him. However, that is something that I originally believed until I dug a little bit deeper and I started to watch a lot more games of the Dallas Mavericks heading into this finals matchup, and in particular what they've been able to do in the playoffs. And I wrote some notes down about the Dallas Mavericks, but honestly, a lot of that stuff goes out the window because this Dallas Mavericks team and what they were able to produce all throughout the regular season, and yes, this includes the regular season matchup that I think way too many people are hanging on to, kind of is irrelevant because how significantly different this team looked in the second half of the year. The Mavericks finished the season with a record of 50-32, had a top 10 offense, but the 18th ranked defense, which is something that significantly changed over time. A net rating that was basically in middle of the pack, and a team that was heavily, and I do mean heavily, dependent on the excellence of Luka and Kyrie all season long to really weather the storm throughout the regular season. However, things really changed and picked up towards the beginning of February, and there's a lot of things that kind of come along with that. The first being, be very mindful that in the beginning part of the season, a key contributor to this team in Maxi Kleber was not available. He was missing games, and that right there did a huge dent on what this team was able to do all throughout the first phase of the regular season because they were missing their sharpshooter, their three-point shooter, their corner threat that really spaced out the floor and gave more room to operate for really everyone. Another reason why they struggled immensely in the first part of the year is because Derek Lively was figuring it out. He's a young player with literally no experience as he's a rookie, and he was in and out of the lineup dealing with injuries, etc., and also, again, just trying to figure things out. And because of that, the lob threat that this Mavs team, in particular, Luka, relies on to kind of manipulate the defense also wasn't there consistently in the first half of the year. But as I dug a little bit deeper, there are two factors that change what the Dallas Mavericks look like from a personnel standpoint and how they produce and even the wins that they were able to record in the second half of the year. The first being the Grant Williams problem. For those who weren't keeping up with the Dallas Mavericks throughout the year, Grant Williams, who played for the Boston Celtics last year, was an off-season addition, and in the beginning part of the season, it looked like it was going to be a great one. As Grant Williams in his first 20 games as a Dallas Maverick was averaging 10 points while shooting 44% from the field and 42.5% from behind the arc. But after that, boy, did things change because Grant Williams fell off the face of the earth. For the next 25 games, Grant Williams would go from a 42% three-point shooter, corner specialist, to now only shooting 31% from three, and also defensively didn't have the same impact that he once had. And you could very well argue that even some of his defensive prowess was a bit exaggerated in the first half of the season as well. And because of his poor play, as well as some other weird rumors and drama that was happening off the floor, but basically his poor play really contributed to this, he not only played himself out of the starting lineup, but basically played himself out of the rotation and then effectively played himself off the damn team because in the middle of February, he was packaged and moved off to Charlotte. That's how bad he was playing. And I think a lot of people fail to understand how bad this was for this team. When you're missing Maxi Kleber, when you're relying on a rookie and Derek Lively to be effectively your only lob threat, and even he's still trying to figure out, and he's in and out of the lineup, and then your off-season addition that is supposed to be the floor spacer for you ain't really spacing the floor, then now we're talking about a team that was struggling and, again, just in my opinion, overly depending on the excellence of Luka Doncic, and it didn't really look that great. However, in the middle of the season, everything changed, and this is the second thing that I have to bring up in the conversation of why a lot of this stuff for Dallas and throughout the entire season just needs to be thrown out the window, because at the deadline, this team made some drastic changes in addition to what this roster looked like. In particular, like I stated before, moving off of Grant Williams, bringing in PJ Washington, and also at the deadline, they brought in PJ Washington. Now, how much of a change was this? How significant of a change was moving Grant Williams out of the starting five to moving him off the team to then making these additions? How significant of a change was this? Well, the Dallas Mavericks had an offensive rating of 116.5, a defensive rating of 110, and a net rating of 6.2. And more importantly, within this 33-game sample size, they would go on to have a record of 24-9. For those who don't know the math, that is a win percentage of 72 to 73%, which means that if they continued on that pace for an entire season, they were winning at a pace of a 60-win team. Hey guys, Lo here. As I frantically try to upload this video at the last minute before the NBA Finals, I just can't get enough of this information because it is a significant difference on what this team looks like after they they made the mid-season changes in acquisition after getting off of PJ Washington, as y'all saw the numbers, but in particular, the lineup data is even more telling. Basically, any lineup that is consisted of Kyrie Irving and Luka, as well as a healthy Maxi Kleber or Derek Lively, and then obviously Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington, the net ratings are just ridiculous, all of which are double digits. And yes, all of these lineups are just as good, if not better, than any lineup that the Boston Celtics runs with any level of frequency. And also, yes, these are the 3 most ran lineups that the Dallas Mavericks have ran within the same time frame. Yeah, the difference is pretty noticeable. Bye. That's how significant the change was. Luka is averaging 29, 10, and 9 with a steal and a half and shooting splits of 44, 34, and 80. Now, some of you may be saying, that's not that impressive. I see where you're coming from, especially the shooting split standpoint, and Luka's definitely going to have to be better, but be very mindful that in the first 2 rounds in particular, Luka was not healthy. He didn't look anywhere near close to being healthy at all. But Luka, by the time they got to the conference finals, looked like a significantly better player against the number 1 ranked defense, and he's now coming off of basically a week worth of rest. Oh, and just as a reminder, what did Luka do in that series again against the number 1 ranked defense? 32 points, 10 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 steals, shooting splits of 47, 43, 85. If Luka is anywhere near close to that level of player, going up against, in my opinion, worse defenders than what we saw in Minnesota, and you gave him a week rest, these conversations about to be nasty. I'm gonna just let it be known. These conversations about to be nasty. So basically, this is boiling down to, do I believe that Tatum can perform at a well enough level while the Boston Celtics are able to mix up their coverages and their offensive counters enough to where they're not so predictable that they're exploitable? Or do I believe Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving can play at all-time heights? That's effectively what this is coming down. But all the Boston Celtics really have to do is just mix up their coverages, mix up what they do offensively, blitz Luka, get the ball out that nigga's hands, and make Derek Lively and PJ Washington make decisions. And then from there, you can get the ball rolling, and it should be an easy series. With that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Let me know your predictions. I will be watching every single last game of the finals on stream on playback.tv/Lowe's Go check me out. This video should be out same day as game 1 of the NBA Finals. So after you get done watching this video, come straight over there, watch me over there. Also, I will be uploading basically recaps of every single game of the series. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, notification bell. And until next time, I'll see you all later. Peace.